Yeah.
Yeah, the Fox News presenter. He went next level on the UFO stuff on Twitter. Like
Oh,
went
really?
full blown. It's completely true. Aliens are here, as we can see with the Stormtrooper in the background.
He always gets brought up by Stormtrooper. I'm going to tell you a story about this Stormtrooper that I didn't actually tell you before. So this is from a Primark window display about 7 years ago. I got it for my son, but there was a lot of competition to get this thing. A lot of people wanted it. And I had to get it there and then. If I wanted it, I needed to get it right there and then. So I had to walk this thing from the Primark in Brighton down the whole high street in Brighton. I took it on the bus with me. So I sat down in the bus, had that next to me. Obviously, I gave way if any elderly people wanted that seat on the bus. I gave way, but he had a seat on
Did
the
you have to
bus.
buy
I
a
had to
second
take
ticket?
it. No. Lucky enough, stormtroopers are exempt from the buses in Brighton, I guess. But I had to take this thing all the way through town, all the way on the bus, all the way home for my son. My son's grown up now, so it's not in his bedroom. It's ended up in the spare room where, well, my office. And that's where he's taken prime of place, and he's been there ever since. And every single one of these Sunday roasts that I've done, he's been there.
Please,
What was the question? I just went on a rant about Stormtrooper.
No, I'm curious. Was the fact that you had to take it on the bus the inspiration for you getting a van? You're like,
oh right, so I can actually yeah, because at the time I had my little VW Golf, which I wouldn't have been able to fit it in without destroying it. So yeah, maybe he's to thank for the whole channel of mine, Van Man Talks. Maybe you're right.
the power behind the throne.
What was the question you asked me though? You asked me a question before I started ranting about Nigel Farage, Tucker Carlson. That was it.
Yeah.
UFOs. It doesn't surprise me because he's been on Russell Brand's channel recently. You know, the height of conspiracy theory nutcases. And the strangest thing about Tucker Carlson going on Russell Brand's channel is I don't know whether you ever checked out Russell Brand's early YouTube stuff.
Yeah,
I actually really liked it. It's actually one of the reasons that I got more into politics was because his early YouTube stuff was great. It was basically just all it was around the 2014 era where it was all anti-UKIP, anti-Farage. He had that big thing where he was on Question Time with Farage. And it was just bashing the Tories. And he used to get the Sun newspaper and just dismantle it and take the piss out of it. And he was one of the inspirations for even me starting a channel anyway. Obviously, we know what he's gone to now. He's gone absolutely bonkers and everything's been exposed with, you all know what's happened. But in his early YouTube channels, he used to chronically take the piss out of Tucker Carlson, chronically. And Fox News, he used to get Fox News segments on where he'd absolutely rip into him. And Tucker Carlson, he used to take the piss out of every single episode. And now they're like best of buds. And he's got him on his show and he's interviewing him. It's just so strange, the cycle that this guy has taken, Russell Brand.
But as you get older, don't you go more far right?
I think it's different.
More
I
to the
think
right.
yeah, but it's true. Yeah, well, allegedly, you know, people become more conservative as they get older, but I don't think it's that. I think it's the grift. He realized, well, if I become like an anti-vaxxer, or if I become some sort of conspiracy theorist, I can, you know, I'll find a niche where people will follow me, and I think he's succeeded there, and that's why he's gone. Like he's actually on the side of Farage at this stage. You know, he started off criticizing Farage, and now he's pretty much like Farage. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Roast. We have a wonderful guest back with us again, Van Man Talks. Marcus, can you tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Well, first of all, I feel quite honoured that I'm your only guest. It's usually only a specialist slot where you just get one guest in, but I'm also aware it's because unfortunately someone dropped out. So I'll take it. I'll take it. I'm your only guest. I'm your single guest today. Yeah, my name's Marcus. I do a YouTube channel called Van Man Talks where I mainly rip the piss out of GB News, Talk TV for their lies, propaganda, garbage, and just basic shoddy production quality. I enjoy that alongside some drives along in my van in my town Brighton and Sussex, where I basically just try my best to understand what's going on in this country, because it's bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. I spend so much time, and my viewers help me out with trying to understand what's going on with this country. 5 prime ministers, the last 2 prime ministers have not even been elected, an unelected foreign secretary. Honestly, so my viewers help me out in trying to understand what's going on in this country. So that's what I do. Check out my channel if you haven't already.
Before we go to Alex, I just wanted to ask Marcus 2 questions. Have you ever been recognized in Brighton as a YouTuber? And second, what's the strangest experience you've had while driving in Brighton?
Okay. Have I been recognized? Not personally, but people have recognized my van, because I drive a bright orange VW van, and people that watch my channel will know. And there's a couple of residents in Brighton, but a lot of people that come to Brighton. Brighton's a very touristy town anyway, so lots of my viewers they come to Brighton for the weekend, and they're certain they've spotted my orange van. So my orange van gets recognised more than myself. I've never been recognised myself, but my orange van does all the time. They're like, "Were you driving down Lewis Road at 4 o'clock on last Friday?" I was like, "Yeah, I was. Yeah. Oh, I saw your orange van." Other question: what's the weirdest thing that you've seen while driving? I've seen lots of things. Brighton is a very crazy town, but my most vivid one is one that I actually done a short video on my YouTube channel of when I was pulling up at the traffic lights, and the owner with his dog was just walking across, and then the dog decided that was the time it was going to go for a giant poo right in front of me. But the owner was really upset. And he's kind of like, "Oh no, everyone in the traffic's seeing," and he's dragging the dog along. So the dog's just dropping poo as it goes along in front of me. And I don't know. You can go over to my YouTube channel and you can find it in the shorts, but I mixed it in with a perfect example of Liz Truss's tenure as Prime Minister. Maybe Alex in his editing, although I know you're in Spain at the moment, Alex. Maybe you can edit that video in, or put a link in down below to that video. That's probably the strangest thing I've seen while driving.
I like the Liz Truss reference. And my wonderful co-host Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Hi, I'm Alex, also known as Political X. I'm a journalist and a historian and a teacher of many subjects. I've got a quick question. As Boris Johnson, I mean, we're going to bring this up with the COVID inquiry. As Boris Johnson was in hospital, wasn't Dominic Raab also a prime minister for like a week or two? Because he was deputy and he had to take over.
Very good point.
So how many prime ministers have there been in the last 13 years?
Too many.
Is it funny? Cameron, May, Johnson,
Dominic Raab.
Raab.
Do we count Dominic Raab? 5 officially, but then there's some questions. That's a good point, Alex. Dominic Raab.
But he's deputy leader. He's not deputy prime minister.
I thought it was deputy PM. That's why he took over. Because deputy leader, wouldn't that be leader of the party?
I don't know, actually.
Because you've got leader of the House, leader of the party. You definitely have a leader of the party. You've got and then the 1922.
No, but for example, when he's probably not deputy prime minister. Well, because when the prime minister is not there at PMQs, the deputy takes over. In the same with the opposition. So Angela Rayner would take over from Keir Starmer when Keir Starmer's not there.
And Raab took over and winked. He did that really creepy wink at Rayner. So yeah. I think we can include him. I think he did.
Why not? There's been 5. What's the difference? Just make it 6. I mean,
it's almost as long as Liz Truss. And he definitely said in the inquiry that the Prime Minister was unconscious at one stage when he was in hospital. He let that slip. So that means that it's like if the US president is taken ill or goes in for surgery, then the vice president steps in and is technically president, even though it's only a couple of weeks or so.
Dominic Raab probably done the least amount of damage in that time to the country, I'd probably say. Definitely. He'd win that. for a couple of hours that he was in charge or whatever it is. Definitely done the least amount of damage.
Anyway, back to the intro. Max, we found you.
Yeah. Apologies for last week. I wasn't able to attend, but I have been found. My name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel where I talk about British politics and Brexit in particular. Alex, what's our first topic for today?
How did you find the Where's Waldo image I created?
So you have an image on your community page of the Sunday Roast community page. Where's Max? But I haven't found Max, so I don't know if anyone has found Max.
Well, my guess was the drunk guy at the front, but he like sort of stumbled over a barrel with a white wig on. That was the one that most looked like
very
Max.
telling.
No.
Okay, well, I don't know. Maybe there's like a helicopter up in the sky if you zoom in there. I don't know, but I'm sure you'll reveal the answer at some point.
There is. You are in the picture. I'll say that. And there is also, it's strange that you brought up the helicopter because the helicopter got morphed into a human helicopter.
AI.
First topic then. Let's continue. We were talking about conspiracy theories and how it's clickbait. And that's what's happened with Russell Brand. And I guess to a certain extent, Tucker Carlson on the absolute lunacy of what they're talking about. Have you? It's a curious question to throw to both of you. Have you ever been tempted to do that? I mean, we've come close on some of the topics we've talked about on the show in terms of conspiracy theories. Have either of you been actually tempted to go down that route of clicking and picking stories for clickbait reasons as opposed to actual?
Marcus, do you want to answer that first?
Well, I mean, I can safely say no, not with conspiracy theories, but I understand how people that start earning money on YouTube will start chasing views and chasing money. It's an easy thing to do, and that can corrupt the content that you bring out. So just before we came on, we were using Russell Brand as an example, where Russell Brand in his early YouTube career was doing really, really good left-wing content. It was around 2015 where he was just constantly bashing Nigel Farage, bashing UKIP, bashing the Tories. And I actually have a lot to thank him for. I mean, I know we all know what the guy is now. He's been exposed for what he really is, and this sways people's opinions. But I have to be honest that his early YouTube content, I was really a fan of, and it helped me to start doing my own YouTube channel because I wanted to expose the right-wing media. He used to bring the Sun newspaper out, and he used to just dissect it and take the piss out of it. And for me, it was the first time for me to think, oh God, Jesus, this stuff is garbage, isn't it? The right-wing media in this country is absolute garbage. And he was doing fantastic content, but what we were just saying is he was obviously a man that ended up chasing the views, chasing the money, because later on he found an avenue where he could get, I think, the content that he was doing, which was his true beliefs, I feel. It was only a narrow market. There was only a certain amount of people that wanted to watch that stuff, and he expanded it by getting into conspiracy theories. He found out that he could get viewers from the left and the right by not bringing party politics into it and going down the conspiracy theory route. The conspiracy is sort of started off with Russell Brand around COVID, and the conspiracy theories that came out there, the anti-vax, the 5G gamma rays, whatever nonsense was going out at the time. But people love this stuff because it's sensational, and you get loads of views and you get loads of clicks. And I think this is sometimes the problem that sort of left-wing political content creators have, is that sometimes our stuff is not sensationalized. You know, Brexit is a perfect example of this, isn't it? You know, it's not sensational to talk about economics of Brexit, but it's click-worthy to talk about the immigrants coming over and show the breaking point poster. You know, that gets people excited, but sometimes just party politics is a lot more complicated. And so the original question was, have I ever been tempted to make sensationalized content? No, because I think if you go down that avenue, it's like a road that you can't turn back from.
Yeah.
You just have to carry on, and you can't, and you'll alienate your original fan base. And no, definitely not. It's not an area that I've wanted to go down. And it's not why I do YouTube. Okay, I mean, I'm a very small channel. I get a tiny little bit of revenue, which is nice. You know, I always like to think that it pays for my electric bill, what I get. You know, it's a nice little thing to have. But it's not really why I do YouTube. I do YouTube because I enjoy making videos, and I just want to expose the gutter right-wing press in this country and have a laugh along at the same time as well. That's why I do YouTube. And also the community on YouTube I absolutely love. My viewers, my comments. I kind of started off my YouTube journey not being massively into politics. I was into politics, but my original videos, my first videos that I'd done were, I was talking about all types of topics. But then I found out that people enjoyed my videos that I was doing on politics, and that sort of went from then. And I've gone on a journey myself by finding out different things, different information from my viewers and the comments, and talking to people. We've all gone on like a political journey together. So it's been an interesting journey. I'd never want to upset that by chasing the views, and it's not why I have a YouTube channel. I'm sure you feel the same, Max. Right?
Yeah, no,
I'm
exactly.
sure.
No, exactly what you're saying there. I agree. Like when if I'm looking at some of the videos that sort of went quote unquote viral on the channel, they're reaction videos. They're human stories. So people talking about their why they voted for Brexit, or why they didn't vote for Brexit, or whatever like that. Like what's a little bit frustrating for me is when I talk about something informative, talk about economics, talk about consequences to the NHS or something like that, it doesn't have the same impact as, just somebody who voted for Brexit and is responding to that. But as you said, the community, the feedback I've received from people makes it so worthwhile. Building a community, reaching out to people, but also pushing back on certain narratives. For you, it's about holding the right-wing media to account. For me, it's more about holding the Tories to account, because I feel like there's nobody doing that. You see these just recently, Kwasi Kwarteng was brought on to Politics Live. Richard Tice was brought on to Sky News. Why are these people being brought on? One destroyed the economy, and the other was part of the Brexit party. He's not a member of Parliament. He's not a real public representative. So there are real concerns about the people that are being brought on, what sort of narrative that they're trying to push, and how they're not being pushed back against. So I feel like people like Van Man Talks and other YouTube channels are the only ones who are pushing back on these people, holding them to account. But as you said, it's about creating a community and being able to get feedback from people. I make a lot of mistakes. People call me out on it. People correct me, and for me, it's about getting more informed about things. But it's about informing people as well, not chasing clicks, because as you said, that's a dead end. It leads to a road that you can't return from. Alex, what about yourself?
I'm a bit mixed. So I think the first video, Max, that you found, because you reached out to me, which blew my mind, and one of the first videos I did, I got the impression it was the video that caught your attention. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think I've actually asked you. Was Russian interference. And that is arguably a conspiracy theory. All I did for that video was go, what did the UK documents say? What did the US documents say from the Mueller report, from FBI investigations, from the CIA? And I've mentioned the CIA. That's a conspiracy set we can go down. It seems to be quite true. But I put all those documents together and went, right, well, these should be verified. What else is there? BuzzFeed did a report on assassinations taking place in the UK, and you're going, they seem like a credible organization. These seem to have taken these events seem to have taken place. We can't argue about Skripal in Salisbury. I don't think anyone's going to argue with me about that. The question is, what level of interference is there? You look through the documents and you go, right, well, some of this is supported by Swansea University, Edinburgh University, Cardiff University. we can debate Cardiff because that's where Patrick Minford is, and he is crazy as a economist. So take that with a pinch of salt. Sorry, Cardiff University. But that was one of my first big videos. And I would argue that was a conspiracy theory video because I was trying to push out this idea. But at least I said, can I base this on facts? Can I verify some of these sources? And I'm putting on my history hat. This is what you do as a historian. And I'd like to also think, if someone turns up and goes, Alex, this is wrong, here's some evidence to put forward that, I can turn around and go, fair enough, that's better evidence than I put forward, and therefore no problem. What I can say is, I can't name who it was. I did pass on some of these details. I passed on the video and I had a long chat with an MP who, just before the Ukrainian war, started asking very serious questions about what was going on inside the UK government and Boris Johnson's government about Russian interference, money being taken. Led by Donkeys also did a video showing a number of Russian oligarchs who were paying money. And, I'd happily go in front of someone and go, if I was a bad guy, I can see exactly how I could manipulate the UK, manipulate Brexit, cause absolute chaos, and it would cost nothing in comparison to going to war with you or affecting you in other economic ways. So I'm a bit mixed about it. I mentioned CIA. Loads of rumors were kicking around in the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the crazy shit they were doing. And they were. We found out that they were actually dosing people on LSD without their knowledge or permission. Like American citizens. It's totally nuts what they were doing. And that was conspiracy theory until Freedom of Information Act came out. We could even bring up COVID and say, the government was saying one thing and we were all pretty much experiencing something else. And then you get again into that realm of, is it conspiracy theory that people are thinking that it's one thing and the government are actually being really nice? COVID inquiry comes out and it suggests actually the public were pretty much spot on. The government didn't have a plan, didn't know what they were doing, and caused a lot of death. So I think it's quite nuanced in terms of that. I'd love to know your thoughts on what I put forward, because I find there's elements of gray area. By the way, I'll say in general, I don't believe in most conspiracy theories, just to alleviate any worries there.
Well, that's the thing. A conspiracy theory stops being a conspiracy when it's backed up with facts, isn't it? That's when it comes. That's when it changes. So if you've got the facts to back it up, there's plenty of conspiracy theories that are true. Watergate is always the obvious one, isn't it? But that is the difference, isn't it? If you've got the facts to back it up, then it's not a conspiracy theory. It's the truth. It's just the truth.
But I think the difference between and it's also your approach to it is: are you following the evidence or are you leading the evidence? So I think a big problem with many conspiracies is that they come up with an idea. Oh, okay, it's chemtrails, for example. And they say the government is doing this. And what they do is they look for evidence to back that up instead of actually looking at the evidence and coming to the conclusion that the evidence presents. And I think this is a big problem that we have with on social media, on YouTube, on platforms like this, is that you have people who will start off with the position, okay, this is the conclusion. Now let me look for something to back it up, look for evidence to support it. And that's the wrong way. It's not being skeptical. It's not actually following the evidence. Okay, what is the evidence? What is being presented here? So, for example, when it comes to the Russian report, the Russian report says quite clearly that the UK government didn't investigate Russian interference. Like, they specifically didn't investigate it. So it's, it's, why did they not investigate it? Well, we can look at evidence to support, without coming to the conclusion that there's corruption, but we can look at, okay, there are people who have been donating to the Conservative Party from Russia. The former foreign minister, I think it was, his wife paid £150,000, was it, to play tennis with Boris Johnson. Now, whether she thought she was playing tennis with Boris Becker, I don't know, but she was like, who the hell pays £150,000 to play tennis with Boris Johnson? Like, what were you expecting to get back in return? This is the question.
If I could constantly just whack him with tennis balls over in the corner, I'd pay a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah, I think we could have it. We could organize a GoFundMe for that.
It's mental.
But yeah, this is the problem with many of these. So it's important to keep an open mind, but you have to follow the evidence, not lead the evidence.
Religious orientated archaeologists tend to do this. They'll go, Noah's Ark is real. Let's go and find some evidence to prove that it's real. As opposed to, Let's just look at the evidence. Yeah. You're absolutely spot on. Okay, so from that, is Nigel Farage a conspiracy theorist? I think he is. He comes up with quite a lot. He doesn't believe in climate change.
I still believe that worrying about global warming is the stupidest thing in human history.
I believe that if we decide in this country to tax ourselves to the hilt, to put hundreds of thousands of people out of work in manufacturing industries, given that we produce less than 2% of global CO2, that isn't terribly intelligent. But
conspiracy theorist. He thinks immigration is the cause of all problems, and he's said that repeatedly on the show, conspiracy theorist. He didn't believe that Donald Trump advocated for the use of bleach and that was a conspiracy against Donald Trump.
What I'm talking about is when Trump back in April said, then I see the disinfectant, which is bleach, where it knocks it out in a minute. Sorry, bleach is disinfectant, Nigel.
Do you know what?
Bleach is disinfectant.
Grow up, stop being fake news.
Okay. Sorry, Nigel, just to clarify, these are the words of Donald Trump.
Grow up and stop being fake news. He never said bleach.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let's just play the clip. You say he didn't say use disinfectant bleach. This is what he said.
It was interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors.
Sorry, Nigel, have I made that up?
Yes.
Okay.
We just saw the clip.
No, it's okay. It's okay. If you think,
I'm sorry, honestly, you are sinking to the gutter by talking about bleach. You know you are.
So Donald Trump was talking about bleach.
When we can all quite clearly understand that Donald Trump was suggesting putting some form of cleaner down people's lungs and throats to kill the disease. What was the other thing? There was something else that he'd done. Oh yeah, Brexit. Pretty conspiratorial, wasn't it? He used the booger man out to
so
get
have you watched any of I'm a Celebrity? I've watched one clip. There's numerous reasons why I won't watch it. I've never watched it anyway. It's not a program that I watch. I understand that there is actually a real genuine concern that you could tune in and see Nigel Farage's arse. From what I've seen, that's been on display, hasn't it? So obviously that's another reason not to watch it. But the main reason not to watch it, which is what you're talking about, if he's going on about conspiracy theories, is there is no one to keep him in check on this program, is there? This is the biggest concern of him going on a program like this. Now, I don't want to be rude to these celebrities. I don't know who they are, but they're probably just not really generally into politics, which is fine. But he's just got free reign here to now just talk about whatever rubbish he wants, just fill empty-headed people with his rhetoric like he does. He's a master at this stuff. And if ITV was switched on, they would have put someone on there because you're supposed to create drama, right? It's supposed to be great TV. So what they should have done is put in, they've got like an influencer YouTube person on there, haven't they? What they really should have done is they should have got you on there, Max. You've got a reasonable, pretty hefty subscriber count on YouTube. You know, I'd say that if they were going to pick a political personality to get in there and actually challenge Farage, wouldn't that be great TV? I'd turn into that. I think their viewing figures would go up.
Either seeing my behind or Nigel Farage's behind. I'm not sure anyone wants to say that. But I was thinking Alistair Campbell. Alistair Campell would have been a wonderful
someone to challenge him. It makes no sense that they haven't. Usually they work these things out. They do it on Big Brother, don't they? If you have someone that's maybe I don't know, maybe trans and they have someone that's anti-trans, so they have conflict or something, and it makes great TV because they have arguments. I don't know why they haven't brought on a personality that knows their stuff and is anti-Brexit to have this conflict. And you know, like I started saying, it seems like he's got absolutely free reign to just put out his vial like he always does, and no one's challenging him. The one clip that I did see was the French TV presenter, I forget his name,
Fred,
where he did a little bit, you know, he was sort of confronting him with the fact that you know, 50% of our trade is with Europe, you know, why would you throw that away? And Farage said, well, you can buy food anywhere, and You know, you just need someone
Sovereignty.
there with a little bit of know-how to go, yeah, but why, Farage? We can just get everything on our doorstep. Why import from New Zealand or Australia? It's a real shame that they didn't bring someone that had some political savvy. And I guess that's why he's coming out with all his rubbish. And you started with conspiracy theories. I don't know what he's been talking about Trump.
No, but like for me,
That's
I,
Farage.
I actually don't think he's into the conspiracy theory. I don't think he believes what he's saying, because he has recently, or it was a couple of years ago back, he was pumping a company that was into green energy or something like that. Maybe it wasn't green energy, but it was about reforestation or something like that. So he was willing to say whatever he was paid to say. So I think he's someone who follows the crowd. He thinks, okay, which way is the political wind blowing? Okay, I'll go with that. I actually don't know. When it comes to racism, yeah, I think he's a racist. But when it comes to things like Trump, I don't think he actually believed in Trump. He just realized, well, there's a way for me to improve my standing in with the public. There's a chance for me to make some money on the side. This is what I'm going to go with. I think that's what he's all about.
So there's all of you brought up amazing points. There's actually little bits to unpack there. ITV have now pushed him to one side. I think they've reduced the amount they're showing of Nigel in their highlight clips, because apparently he did a whole spiel about Donald Trump and they wouldn't broadcast it. GB News went nuts about it. It was interesting you brought up about money, because he's being caught making racist comments. I'm not going to repeat what he said, and I won't include the clip on this either. He made racist comments on Cameo, and of course he's now not able to reply because that's banned whilst he's stuck out in the middle of nowhere of Australia. And the conspiracy theory stuff, I'd say he was a climate change denier. I'd say that's a conspiracy theory. I can get the rest. You're right, he does follow the wind. I think on climate change, I think he hasn't changed his stance, has he? He's still like a climate denier. And Richard Tice did some wacky advert for the Reform Party saying that climate change isn't real.
CO2. People make out that it's some form of poison. It's not. It's plant food. It's responsible for photosynthesis, without which we get no plants, no food, we all die. You've got to challenge the mainstream narrative on this. Oh, and by the way, do you know how much CO2 is in the atmosphere? Is it 10%, 20%, 5%? No, it's 0.04 of 1%. That's like one limb on one person in Wembley Stadium of 100,000 people. It's only just above a record multi-million year low. It's not a problem. Stop worrying. Stop being scared.
No, but I don't know how much they actually believe and how much they believe they can make money out of. Because
yeah, this is the difference, isn't it? It's where he follows the money. So I think personally that he actually probably believes in climate change, but he is following the money. And it's the popularism that you just talked about, that he will become popular by not, because it's a popular position with a lot of people now, which is ever more increasing thanks to the likes of GB News, the anti-climate change stance. I think that he actually understands climate change, but he knows it's not in his favor to do so, and it's following the money and GB News. Talking to GB News on climate change, I just done a video which was quite interesting on their resident climate change scientist they have on GB News. They have a resident climate change scientist, and his evidence against climate change was that droughts were more frequent in the 1700s. He didn't let on that it was in the UK, so his stats were for the UK, that droughts were more prevalent in the 1700s. And also, he's not even a climate change scientist. He's a water resource manager for Wales, which is basically a glorified plumber. And but that's good enough qualifications for GB News. That's good enough. They're like, right, we need a resident climate scientist. There's some guy that knows something about water in Wales. He'll do. But
it comes back. But it comes back to what I was saying before. It's about following. It's about leading the evidence. So what he'll do is, okay, what I have to do is I have to deny climate change. I have to find something that supports this position for GB News because they're paying me whatever. So what is it? Okay, let me have a look around for something that would that would support my position. Oh, look, there was a drought in the 1700s. There we go. See, People are talking about climate change today. We've had a similar situation in the past. That means the climate science is all debunked. So that's the problem. And then GB News obviously have a position, as you well know, of denying science, be it the pandemic, during the pandemic, during when it comes to climate change, anything. They start off with the position, the scientists are wrong, let me look for something to support that.
But isn't Brexit a conspiracy theory to suggest that the EU was some evil that had control? And I mean, the other thing, so we mentioned that I'm abroad at the moment. It's really interesting hearing people describe the UK as one country. Well, it's not. It's a union. It's a mini union. It's a mini authoritarian version of the EU. And we know that because, I mean, really clear. I mean, the COVID inquiry, which we'll jump onto a bit later, has shown that with Dominic Raab. But I mean, I'm not wrong here. Like, the stuff he was saying was just made up garbage. And when all the experts put facts, he just poo-pooed it and went, Britain's great, Britain's great, Britain's great. Isn't that a conspiracy theory in itself? Or do you still think he went for Brexit to make money?
Well, when it comes to, there is a sort of conspiracy that that the European Union is this sort of corrupt institution that wanted to keep Britain in. I mean, if you look at some of the latest clips from GB News, they also say about how Ben Habib in particular would say how the EU didn't want Britain to leave and it was thwarting its attempts to leave. Because it feeds into a narrative of people who feel that something has been taken away from them. So they voted to leave, but they expected sunlit uplands. And where are these sunlit uplands? So instead of actually turning around and blaming the people who promised them lies, who promised them, a land of milk and honey, they're angry with the European Union again, saying, oh, well, it's the European Union's fault. Like, how can you continue to blame the European Union if the UK is no longer a member? It just doesn't make any sense. Marcus, what do you think?
It's a conspiracy theory. The wonderland of Brexit UK that Farage is offering back in 2015. I guess that whole system is a conspiracy theory in itself, because I don't even know what that means really. I guess it's a world where everyone's white and no people are talking other languages, and but then how do we fill all our jobs and do everything that needs done? And it's a very Farage Brexit wonderland where I don't know how anything gets done. But yeah, that's a conspiracy theory that could ever happen. Do we even want that happening? So yeah, Brexit, I guess you could call it a conspiracy theory. I guess you could, really.
It's so strange when you look at it like that. And let's move on to what Raab said about the devolved government. He clearly stated that they were irritating.
At least from Wales' perspective, the issue of your irritation. And I have you noted as explaining in your response that there were perfectly good arguments sometimes why they, presumably the devolved administrations, might go a bit slower or a bit quicker, or why they wanted something that they hadn't yet had. But you also say sometimes it just felt like, for the sake of doing something out of kilter with the UK government, that there was a political gain in doing so. And then you go on to say that you thought the differences were relatively minor in any event. Now, I'd like to ask you about that, particularly focusing on the issue of your irritation. You have described yourself as a recovering lawyer, and you'll know the benefit of basing your views on concrete evidence. So my question to you is this: why are you irritated on the basis that sometimes you just felt like it was political, when you don't actually have evidence to support that, but you do, by your own words, have evidence to support the idea that perfectly good arguments have been made as to why things could go faster or slower in Scotland or Wales?
So, look, if I'd have had advance notice, I would have pored over the documents and come with a good example for Wales and a good example for Scotland. Forgive me, but we're talking about matters that were a long time ago. And also, I'm not trying to needle either Plaid Cymru or the SNP. But the truth is, the answer to your question is there's often a combination of reasons. Some were more compelling or persuasive on the facts than others.
Indeed, but you weren't present at for example, meetings with Scottish CMO when the decisions were being taken in Scotland. So my question is, why are you ascribing the idea that it's political instead of the idea that it might simply be, as you've said, a reasonable decision to take?
Well, because I was in a whole range of meetings with First Ministers or other ministers from the devolved administrations, whether it's Welsh or Scottish, and I also could see the grounds or the reasons, whether it was on the papers or as explained by them, for the decisions, and that was the view I took.
Because they wanted to know what was going on with the COVID plan. So you're going, you clearly haven't communicated with them, and at the same time, you're slagging them off, even though they are clearly a government and a country. I mean, they're in every single sport as a separate nation, bar the Olympics and the British and Irish Lions tour. That's it. Every other tournament, they're a separate nation. So they're obviously recognised as a separate nation. And yet within the union, they can't leave with their own choosing. And apparently Westminster considers them to be irritating when they go, we need to know what's going on because we've got to run our area.
It was during the pandemic itself, not even within the inquiry, but it was during the pandemic. If you remember back, Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford were constantly asking Boris Johnson for meetings to deal with the pandemic, and they were refused on almost every occasion because, as you said, it was seen as an irritant. But I think it was also a deeper political problem, because if Wales and Scotland were doing a better job than Westminster, then it showed Westminster to be incompetent. And the Tories were at each other's throats in a sense, because you had the moderates who wanted to do a lockdown, who realized, okay, we need to lock down, we need to protect the public. But then you had the headbangers who were like, no, we don't need lockdowns, just let it run wild. And then I think there was also another section within that, there was a crazy wing of the Conservative Party, but there was also another wing which wanted to protect their interests. So they were maybe they had property portfolios, and they knew that if people are working from home or there's a lockdown, they're going to lose money because, if businesses are not renting property, they're not making money. So there was and you can look at people like Richard Tice as well. They make a lot of their money through property. And if they realize that, well, if people are not going into the office, we don't need office space. If we don't need office space, then businesses don't need to rent. If they're not renting, well, then if there are fewer businesses renting, the value of rent drops because there's more supply. So, these people were banging on about lockdowns, but of course they couldn't come out and say, well, we're losing money, get people back into the office. They had to say it as well. This is, it's unscientific. And then it feeds back into the, Van Man's niche about GB News, and Talk TV. If you look at some of their content, especially during the pandemic, they were like, no, the lockdown is wrong. The lockdown is unscientific. And then they'd bring on quote unquote experts who would say that the lockdowns were not working. But in many cases, the lockdowns didn't work because they weren't long enough, or they weren't brought in early enough. And then the response after is, well, the lockdown damaged the economy. Yes, of course they did, but the not having a lockdown would have damaged the economy much worse because you'd end up having people die.
Really, really interesting what you said there, Max, because basically what you're saying is you have a difference between which government we had. We had a government that when COVID came along thought, oh shit, we're going to lose a hell of a lot of money and we need to look after the rich. But you had other governments like in New Zealand or, devolved even in Scotland with Nicola Sturgeon, where COVID comes along and the first reaction is, how do we save lives? How do we save people? That's the main difference between what we had. We had a government that wanted to look after and thought, well, if we do lockdowns, then it's going to hit us absolutely massively. It's the main difference, and that's the strangest thing when you think back to COVID and the government we had. I'm sure you've all done this. If you could actually go through back in history and pick one government to have to deal with this worldwide crisis of COVID, the government we had, without doubt, would be the last one you pick, wouldn't it? You would go for any other government throughout the history of time in this country. Boris Johnson's government of 2020 would just be the worst that you would pick. And it's interesting you go on to talking about GB News and their opinions. Recently, the COVID inquiry's been about, and they're still going on this rhetoric that lockdowns were a disaster and they shouldn't have happened. A lot of another thing that they do quite a lot of is compare us with Sweden that didn't lock down. You know, they say, oh, we should have been more like Sweden, we wouldn't be in the problems that we have now. And this is half the problem with COVID. You can't compare countries. It's absolutely ridiculous to compare us to Sweden. Sweden have got like a population of about 8 million, I think, a lot of rural areas that they live in. They've got a functioning national health service, a well-funded and well-run national health service. The point of the lockdowns in this country was to protect the NHS. Without doubt, the NHS would have absolutely dismantled. My wife is a nurse. I saw every day what she went through working during COVID. There is no way that the hospitals would have been able to cope if we didn't lock down. And like I say, comparing different countries is absolutely futile and stupid. But this is what your GB News lot are still trying to bang home, that we shouldn't have locked down. And it's absolute madness to me. It really is.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do that. I think there was an interest. You could make specific comparisons as opposed to overall comparisons, because obviously there's like things that don't correlate: the size of the population, the economy, the health service, even the weight and the age of the population. Is everyone fat? Well, if you're fat, you're more likely to die. Is everyone unhealthy? What about sunlight? Vitamin D seems to have an effect. You know, if you weren't able to process as much vitamin D, you were more likely to suffer bad consequences from it. I would with Italy, I thought it was quite interesting because that came up in the COVID inquiry, that there was comparisons to be had there. Rich, affluent country, they didn't lock down. They just were letting it run rampant, and their hospitals couldn't cope. One of the big differences is obviously the fact that you have intergenerational families within one household, which isn't so much the case in the UK. So again, it's very difficult to make that comparison. I did hear a Harvard researcher who was based in Vietnam go, actually, there's a lot of comparisons with Vietnam to the UK. But there's obviously differences as well. Similar population size, nowhere near as an obese population. But the other big interesting thing that I've always brought up, and so did the professor, was the fact that China had a huge tourist influx into Vietnam. So there's a good chance that Chinese tourists coming over would spread it throughout the population quite rapidly. The Vietnamese government, and I would be an advocate for this, just shut down their borders. Anyone coming in had to go and stay in a government-run hotel for 2 weeks, and then the virus was cleared. If you look at the economy in Vietnam, it's quite authoritarian to do that, you can argue. Link that back into the UK, what was being claimed in the COVID report earlier, yesterday. But you went into the hotel, you were fed, you had to stay there for 2 weeks, given a TV. I think they gave them some books as well, and you were just in the hotel for 2 weeks. Not great. It's not a great solution. No solution's perfect. But they didn't have the death numbers that anyone else did in Europe. They also allowed the economy to grow because everyone could continue, because the virus couldn't get in. It was almost like putting up a wall. Whereas here, and it was reported in the COVID report, I saw Piers Morgan rip into Grant Shapps about that, with an expert they had from the Aviation Authority ripping into Grant Shapps as well. Not directly, but at a different episode. And basically, Piers Morgan said to Grant Shapps, you've done nothing. You've literally done nothing to protect the UK. There's no border security. There's nowhere to put any of these people coming in. And Grant Shapps argued the point. But I came through that airport. I came in from Norway just as everything broke. Absolute chaos in Heathrow. Just complete chaos. I even saw, bear in mind we're meant to be in lockdown, a ring of policemen sat by, and security, all having a natter, no more than a couple of meters apart, if that. Whilst crowds of people were sat around the conveyor belt waiting to get luggage. And it was just ramshackle. And I've just come from Norway, where everyone's got masks on, everyone's sat apart, everyone's quite calm. And then in the UK, you've come in, and then you go and take a train where if you've got COVID, you've just infected everyone in the airport, or numbers in the airport. You can infect people on the train, then on the bus if you need to take that, then in the streets. And it's just like, this is crazy. But in the report today, they were confirming through WhatsApp messages and memos The government deliberately kept it open because of the economy. And it comes back to what both you guys have said. They got it into their heads that the economy was the thing to protect. And yet, actually, it's the people, because the people make the economy. And they can't get it into their thick skulls. That's how it operates. And that's why I think we're in this. I mean, we can argue there's other reasons for it. But the economic mess in the UK at the moment is because of this ideological batshit, crazy ideology that it's all about money, cash, and business, but it's people that make that up, and they can't. It's almost like dealing with someone with a ideology that the economy and humans are separate. It's just maddening. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, no, just one other thing that both of you raised there, and Van talks about the worst government the worst government possible to be in charge of this. But I think there's something that leads into that is trust. So if you look at some of the states where they had low numbers, with the exception of Italy, because it sort of started here. But if you look at many of the countries like New Zealand, there's a high level of trust between the citizens and the government. So when the government say, look, you need to wear a mask, people would wear a mask. They said, look, you need to social distance, people would do it. But what you saw with Boris Johnson and the Tories was they had built up over the last number of decades, we could even say decades, but in particular the last 13 years, this idea that you shouldn't trust the government. The government is out to get you. And you saw it also in the US when it came to Donald Trump, being constantly pushing this narrative that the government is trying to take away your rights. And you had it in Parliament as well, which I found really frustrating, because when it came to Brexit, Boris Johnson had no whims about removing the whip from Remainer MPs. But when it came to COVID, there were people who were really undermining his message, and he left them in place. And what it did was it created this mindset that, well, when Boris Johnson says, of course, Boris Johnson, a compulsive liar, but when it came to Dominic Cummings breaking the rules and not being punished over it, then people obviously thought, well, what's the point in following the rules if the government aren't doing it? And this is before Partygate. This is before we found out about what was happening at Number 10. Dominic Cummings breaking the rules and not suffering any consequences. And I remember during the pandemic, if you look at any other country in Europe, whenever a public representative was giving a speech or explaining some sort of new rule or guidance, they always wore a mask. Even the right-wing parties here in Italy, the far-right parties, when they were like some of the representatives in government were presenting a new guidance or whatever, they always wore a mask, even the really crazy ones. But whenever I saw Boris Johnson delivering a speech, the daily update on the pandemic, he never wore a mask. He would actually take the mask off to deliver the speech. And I think this undermined public trust as well. People were convinced that, well, you didn't have to, the mask was optional. And then there was obviously within Parliament as well, this idea we need to get rid of the mask, we need to get rid of the lockdown. So the focus was not about dealing with the pandemic, it was about dealing with the consequences of the pandemic.
It's really interesting you say that, Max, because there's an element within all of this, twofold. One, you've got this liberal ideology, which they've got, which is don't tell us what to do, which also probably comes in from thinking that they're better from everyone else, so they don't need to take orders. I would say that's a general theme. And we've seen it over the last few weeks with all of them being interviewed. They seem to want to be above the lawyers. I think the judge even had to correct Gove and go, yeah, he might be biased, but it's me that's making the decision and I'm not biased. So knock it off. Because Gove was going on the attack with the QC, Casey, I think it is now called. Although we can talk about the king and the racism allegations that came out with Piers Morgan in a minute. That was quite interesting. Sorry, I'm sidetracking. But it's this, we're above everything. The party showed that they thought they were above everything, that the laws didn't apply to them. They've got this liberal identity, which actually showed, just twigged, it slightly shows that they were disconnected from the public. Part of the reason we think that they didn't believe that the public would follow the rules, which is part of the reason why they hesitated, because they got feedback from groups, but also probably their own mentality. It's interesting because you look at, like, and we brought it up a couple of times, World War II, you had the blackout, everyone had to black out the curtains and switch the lights off so that bombers didn't get in and blow us up. And you almost get the impression that this lot, if they'd been in charge in World War II, would have gone, fuck the rules, I'm putting on a Christmas tree and I'm having the lights on and I'll put a big Santa thing around my house so everyone can see it for miles because I want to be Christmas and I like Christmas, so I don't give a shit about the rules. And it seems like COVID was almost identical to that. I couldn't imagine Winston Churchill in a million years, and we talk about the controversies, man. I can't imagine him in a million years going, let's stick on all the Christmas tree lights across London because it looks pretty and it'll increase morale.
You'd have Julie Hartley Brewer saying, "It's your right to turn on your lights."
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's so true, the points that you make up. That was the biggest failings of it, the trust in government and the incompetence of the government early on, straight away. Because when COVID first come about, I remember thinking, like, I can't stand Boris Johnson, I can't stand this government. But when it first come about, COVID, I thought, surely they're going to do their job. That this is big, surely if they're ever going to actually do their job, they're going to do it now, because people are dying. This is huge. So for a moment I thought, right, I'm going to put my trust in you, Boris Johnson. I think that this will be big enough for you to actually do your job. But then the incompetence just unraveled straight away. You talk about masks. We were like one in, one out with every single policy. Masks didn't get enforced in shops for a long time in England. Didn't know, are we supposed to wear a mask? Are we supposed to not? And then Dominic Cummings, and then parties, and then it just all unravels into this incompetence that we're like, well, yeah, we don't trust you. We don't trust you at all. So, people are going to flaunt the laws and not do the right thing. And just an absolute shit show from the start. But one thing I want to ask you guys about this in COVID inquiry is, are they going to get in to Michelle Mone in the House of Lords and the dodgy PPE contacts? Are they going to get into this? Because this is what I want to know about the corruption. Are they going to dive into this sort of stuff? I don't know whether you guys know if they're going to or not.
I don't know, but I hope they will, because this was fundamental to both the response. Because many business, I remember during the pandemic, there was a company, a British company, who was making PPE, and they said that they had reached out to the government, they had reached out to the NHS, said, look, we're ready to go. We're making PPE for the US, and they had received nothing back from the health minister or the health secretary. So they said, look, we want to produce PPE. And somebody else, of course, won the contract, who had, I don't know, never been in the business of PPE in the first place. So
this is what I want them to look into. This is more important to me, because we know this government are incompetent. For some reason, the country decided to vote this lot in 2019. Most people that actually have a brain know that these guys are completely incompetent. So it's not strange to me to find out that they're incompetent dealing with this. But I want to know about the corruption, and I want every single penny of that corrupt money coming back. That's what really interests me. And these PPE contracts need to be investigated properly. As soon as I heard out about this corruption, it always brought me back. I know you, Alex, like to go back to the First World War and Second World War, but there was a company in the First World War, you probably know about this story, that got the contract to supply boots to the English army. And they basically, it's the same thing as PPE contracts. They wanted that contract because it was lucrative, but they didn't have the tools to get them properly. They were shoddy boots, they got cheap materials, and they just done it because of the contract. And it always reminds me of that. It always brings me back to that story in the First World. It's exactly the same thing when a pandemic comes along. Instead of a government thinking, how do we save lives? How do we help people? We have a government that wants to think, right, what opportunities can we get from this? What money can we grasp? What contracts can we give out? And it's just, that's what I want this COVID inquiry to dive into. That's what I'm more interested in, the corruption.
I've often felt it's a bit like we all want to play like the game of life, and these guys are playing Monopoly, helping themselves to all the houses. They're running the fucking banks, and they're sticking their hand in the till at any opportunity they can, because that's generally what happens when you play Monopoly and you're the banker. And they are the banker. What were your thoughts on the king being claimed to be the racist? Are you shocked? Is anyone shocked? Is it a conspiracy theory? Because it's being announced in the Netherlands.
I'm a bit surprised about Charles, because Prince Philip wouldn't be a surprise, but Charles, no, I wasn't sure. No, I mean, he's generally a bit more open culturally, but
has he though?
I'm not
He's
sure.
had Jimmy Savile, and then his brothers had Epstein. I don't know of any other family that's had that many prolific sex offenders connected to them. I don't know of another family that's done that. And yet, are they open?
I think he's tried more to get away from that race. See, I'm the same as you, Max. Actually, I'm surprised that the cake. Some of the others wouldn't shock me, but Charles does. And maybe it's empty-headed gestures, but I know recently during the poppy appeal, he had the black poppy, which represents all the ethnic minorities that died during the First World War, and tries to bring light to those people, not just the English people. So he's done things like that. And like I say, I don't know whether that's just empty-headed gestures to try and pander to that audience, or whether he has deep down racist feelings. But for him, yeah, it's a surprise. What is the evidence, Alex? Then, so can you explain what the evidence is?
The words of Meghan Markle and Harry saying they came up to us and said this, and then refused to make comment of who said it, and then it's been an accidental release into Holland of the book. It's been a translation error or a miscommunication error, and they've now released the names and said it was. I'm pretty sure they've definitely said King Charles. There's a bit of ambiguity as to whether or not it's Kate as well, but it looks like they both came up to them and said, "Oh, are you concerned about the skin color of your child?" It's like, you guys are one of the most powerful, rich families in the UK. Why are you concerned about that? How have you got that into your head that that's a problem? And you go, apple doesn't tend to fall far from tree. Maybe we can take that with a pinch of salt. But Prince Philip was horrific. Even Piers Morgan, this is a wacky one, even Piers Morgan has noted that Meghan was going to marry into a royal family that's known for its racism. And
I will never believe it. But now we can start the process of finding out if they ever got uttered, what the context was, and whether there was any racial intent at all. Like I say, I don't believe there was. The royals who are named in this book are King Charles and Catherine, Princess of Wales. She's mixed race, she's American, she's a divorcee, actress. Those are 4 ticks. No member of the royal family, the senior members, ever thought they would see having to be ticked. Meghan's marrying into a family which has, to put it mildly, a dodgy track record on race. It's not Meghan Markle's problem, it's their problem.
Yeah, now he's flipped, and him and GB News seem to want to protect the royal family at all costs. And they're just saying, Meghan's a liar, the guy who authored the book is a liar, therefore none of this is true.
They're just not normal people, are they? I mean, this is the problem here. This is the problem with the royal family. They're just not normal. You can't be normal if you're born into that environment. I'm sure you guys are the same. I would not want that. Okay, yeah, they don't have to worry about money for the rest of their lives, but I wouldn't want that life. I mean, Harry not being able to go and live his life as a teenager and go and party with his friends. You can't do any of that stuff. It's just not normal. So, I mean, that's why I'd actually, if we got time, I'd like to hear your opinions on what you'd want from the royal family in this go, whether you'd get rid of it completely. My opinion would be massive descaling, just have the king, open up the rest of Buckingham Palace. All the tourists can go and view. They can have one wing of Buckingham Palace. The rest of them have to go and work like everyone else. And it's kind of like jury service. When it's your time to be king, you can go up and do that. That would be my view. That'd be my view. But
king for the day, yeah.
What I don't know what your opinions would be, but it's not normal. It just breeds abnormal people, this royal family. It just needs to go. It needs to disband. I'd massively descale it myself, but I don't know what your opinions are.
Of course, I'm not a huge advocate for the royal family, but I think a republic is the way to go. But what you said there is interesting about having what about having a member of the public king for a year?
Yeah.
Like, within you have to follow certain rules, of course. You're not allowed to go completely crazy, but it could be actually quite insightful for somebody who's come from a deprived background to be able to bring something to the table, because the royal family, as you said, are completely dysfunctional, and the whole idea that you're born into something that you can't leave. It's you can technically leave, but there are huge consequences if you do. But yeah, you can't, like my heart goes out to Harry. He wants to distance himself from the royal family. He doesn't agree with this sort of thing, and I really admired him when he about a year ago, I think it was, he was delivering a speech at a charity event, and he asked them to call him Harry, not His Royal Highness or the Prince of Wales or whatever it was at the time. Not Prince of Wales, whatever he was, but he just call me Harry. And
he's probably longing for that. He's really longing for that. He wants that normality. He's sick of it. I would be.
Well, it was also interesting as well within that book. The claim is that William and Harry think that the investigation into their mother's death was a sham. That was something else that came out. So even I'd get rid of it, and I'd have a 10-year elected system. Just go longevity, because we need someone looking at the system at a long distance. And the governments don't do that. That's part of the reason why the pandemic was so bad, because they're all short term. What we're going to do in 4 years? Oh, we've got to put some money into PPE. Oh, there's never a pandemic, so I don't care. Let's not do that, and we'll put the money elsewhere. You know, that's the reason why we were in such a mess. Be interesting to see if that comes up in the COVID inquiry. But yeah, I quite like the Irish system though. You vote someone in, and they just seem to have, they're just there for a ritual purpose.
Yeah, it's just a figurehead. Yeah, doesn't like.
But it seems quite a jolly chap.
Although he has been quite controversial recently when it comes to Palestine and Israel. But we've run out of time, so we'll have to say bye-bye.
Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate that. That's it.
Be sure to tune in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.